On today's show, we talk about upcoming things to do in our area, hear original poetry, revisit the anatomy of a Hallmark movie, the life and legacy of Joshua Glynn, and a factory that became a community. Let's get started. Established in 1979, the annual Telly Awards recognize excellence created for television and in video for all screens, representing work from television stations, ad agencies, and production companies from around the world. We are thrilled to announce that this year, the local scene was presented with 4 Telly Awards. Over the next few weeks, we'll revisit those award-winning pieces, as well as some other past wins. First up, we bring you Christmas in July with 2023 Silver Telly Award winner for comedy, Open Here, Anatomy of a Hallmark Movie, written and performed by Tiff Phillips.
Welcome! Today we are going to talk about the anatomy of a Hallmark Christmas movie, because it's that time of year again where the big city female CEO has to go back to her hometown and save her great uncle's candy store, and in return finds love and discovers the true meaning of Christmas. You're listening to Open Here, podcast produced by PAC TV. I'm Tiff Phillips. Let's get started. Hi, friends. Hope you're having a magical holiday season filled with joy, peace, and short lines at the discount department store. Well, as I said before, it's that time of year again, and what's better than getting snuggled up with a cup of hot chocolate and turning on the cheesiest Hallmark Christmas movie you can find? Nothing. The answer is nothing. So, why do we love them? Is it the bah humbug female protagonist who learns to love again? The strapping male lead who can build a house in 2 days? Or is it the small population of cheerful townsfolk who deck the halls and come together to save Christmas? Whatever you're in it for, Hallmark movies adhere to a basic formula, and there are boxes that these movies need to check. Let's break this down and examine the classically terrible rules that many of us have come to know and love. Rule number 1, the main character comes home for Christmas. Usually, it's a big city broad whose business is most likely advertising and comes home to her small, picturesque hometown, named after a reindeer or some type of Christmas tree. Most of the time, she's in the middle of closing a big deal with a business or corporation that's Christmas-themed, a chocolatier or a toy company. It's usually a toy company. Now, the reason she comes home is because a loved one is in trouble, but not serious trouble, like the bank wants to foreclose on their doghouse or something, or because she's inherited a busted-up old farmhouse and has to renovate it. Enter rule number 2, the male lead. Usually a carpenter, a handyman, or a town sheriff, or all of the above. He's usually slightly bearded and wears plaid. And he used to be a lawyer, but quit because, well, the small-town life was a calling. Sometimes he has a kid. Most of the time, like all the time, he has a dog named Hank or George. Sometimes he's an old flame who has loved her since he set eyes on her from the jungle gym. And 10 times out of 10, they initially can't stand each other. Now that we've gotten the main characters out of the way, let's chat about some of the townsfolk in rule number 3. This one is a little multifaceted. Bullet point 1. Because Hallmark cranks these movies out factory style in large quantities, each movie's production budget is super small. I kid you not, there's usually like 20 people in these towns. Seriously, watch closely, you'll see the same faces in every single scene. It's hilarious. Bullet point number 2, there has to be a cafe/bakery with a super smiley, friendly owner, usually in their late 50s, early 60s, who offers up free cookies to everybody. How do these people make money? Not only is there only 20 people in the town, but you're giving away free stuff all the time. Also, usually this person plays a crucial part in the plot. He or she, most of the time she, usually unveils something tragic about one of the main characters' past that changes how they interact. You see, Shauna, when Luke was young, he lost his mother's cousin's roommate in a tragic snowman making accident, and that's why he runs from love. Sigh, gets me every time. Bullet point number 3. Now, this isn't always the case, but sometimes one of the townsfolk is magical. Sometimes they're an angel, sometimes they're Santa Claus, and usually this person is playing matchmaker with our 2 lovebirds. Which is cute, but dang Santa, don't you have other things to do the week before Christmas? Those elves are probably getting ready to strike. Also, I want to point out something. In a town of 20 people, you'd think that someone would realize that there is a weird stranger who randomly appears at events and watches these 20-somethings going on dates. No? Just me? Okay. Number 4, the almost lovers must go Christmas tree shopping. What's better than a makeshift sort of date to a Christmas tree farm? Subrule: one of the characters has to go on and on about the magic of Christmas. Only hitch, they're a little late in the game. I mean, the movie usually is set like a week before Christmas. Why haven't these guys gotten a tree yet? Time's a ticking. Also, it's a rule that the tree must fall on one of them or the couple must serendipitously land on each other. Ah, there's the spark. Number 5, the villain. Now, when I say villain, I mean we're talking about an extremely lightweight adversary here. The antagonist is usually the female lead's current city boy love interest, who's an odd mix of unintentionally goofy and serious at the same time. And he's usually really overgroomed. He swoops into town wearing a 3-piece suit and trench coat, and by day 2, he's, well, okay, so this guy's dressed down look is like a pink polo shirt and a pair of khakis, but hey, I'm not a person to judge. I have an obscene amount of Star Wars t-shirts, so really, don't look to me for fashion advice. His name is usually something prim and proper like James, or Princeton, or William. And what makes him a subtle villain is that he comes into town because he senses there's something going on with his girlfriend, like maybe she's decorating someone else's Christmas tree. Honestly, I don't even know what that means. I don't know why I'm allowed to have a podcast. After his spidey senses are confirmed, he usually has some weak marriage proposal, which leads to our main gal's aha moment, where she's like, Jeffrey, I can't marry you, because in the last 3 hours I've been in Candy Caneville, I've changed. I no longer want to make large amounts of money. I want love and free cookies forever. And Alexander is like, oh well, I'm gonna go back to my penthouse now and make boatloads of money. Enjoy your frozen tundra. Rule number 6, the big event. You cannot have a Hallmark movie without having a big event. Most of the time it's a gala or a baking competition or a big party that everyone talks about for the entire duration of the movie. And usually something terrible happens before it, like all of the desserts fall into the river and all of the townspeople have to come together in 2 days to put it together. Which means there has to come this silly montage where the lovebirds are running around trying to put together the event. The montage usually involves them getting into a food fight, probably involving flour, or a snowball fight, probably involving snow. And the montage usually concludes with them locking eyes from across the room. Also at said event, there needs to be a moment where Our Lady comes down a long staircase dramatically in a $2,000 dress and just wows our dude with her beauty. I mean, Sarah is fashion, honey. Inevitably, something goes wrong that night and someone tells their real identity or a misunderstanding occurs and drama unfolds. But don't worry, because all will be okay soon. Rule number 7. This is the most important part. There has to be a happy ending. No Thelma and Louise drive off the cliff conclusions, no shocking Saw trilogy style plot twists. Bruce Willis hasn't been dead all this time. Just a sweet ending where the town is saved, Christmas lives, and true love wins. Also, they have to have an extremely awkward kiss. Oh, and snow. There must be snow on Christmas. Rules is rules. Sigh, who doesn't love a happy ending? You know, we go into these movies knowing how crappy they're going to be. Terrible acting, predictable storylines, and the corniest dialogue you'll ever hear in your entire life. So why do we do it? Well, let's face it. There's a lot of chaos happening right now. The pandemic, political polarization, global warming, and McDonald's keeps changing their recipe on their McChicken. A lot of what you see on TV reflects that strife. Well, maybe not the McChicken. There's this darkness that has invaded our screens. Too much of what's bad in our society is reflected in what we watch. Shows like crime procedurals are real and vivid and way too close to home. And let's not even get started on the news. But then we turn on a silly toothache-inducing Christmas movie, and for 84 minutes, we can take a trip to Pine Valley or Snowy River Falls or Evergreen Village and not think about things for a while. Sometimes you just want a moment on your couch to not be cerebral. These movies are not clever or thought-provoking. They don't make you contemplate life. It's just a little bit of magic, a little bit of cheer, a little bit of you and a bowl of popcorn remembering not to take things so seriously. And maybe we can take that cheer, those positive vibes these movies give us, and spread it to those who maybe aren't so lucky to have these moments. Maybe we can learn a thing or two from our big city broad who lives happily ever after. Maybe there's beauty in being cheesy. And I think we'll leave it on that note. You've been listening to Open Here, a podcast produced by the local scene of Plymouth Area Community Television. PAC-TV is the community media provider for the Massachusetts towns of Plymouth, Pembroke, Kingston, and Duxbury. To see more of our content, visit pactv.org/thelocalscene. I'm Tiff Phillips. Thanks for tuning in. Let's hang out again soon.
To listen to more episodes of Open Here, head to our YouTube channel or find us on Apple or Spotify. The Duxbury Free Library Summer Folk Music Series continues on July 18th at 6 p.m. in the Reading Garden with New England folk duo Ash and Eric. This married couple have been making beautiful music together since 2012, when the Worcester natives connected instantly, as if they had always known each other. Experience their lush harmonies and swirling acoustic guitar in person, and make it a music and dinner date night. Surf Dog's food truck will be there too. No registration is required. Climate change is affecting all of us, but environmental concerns are profound for young people who will inherit the planet. If you're a teen, age 13 to 18, who wants to contribute to making our world an environmentally better place, you're invited to join the Changing Tides Teen Sustainability Club at the Plymouth Public Library. This monthly club is a safe space to discuss current environmental topics, do fun activities, and get to know other like-minded teens in the area. The first club meeting is at 6 p.m. on July 25th in the library's craft room. No registration is required. For questions, email Ms. Natalie at nbennington@plymouth.ocln.org. This 2020 Silver Telly Award winner for public awareness featured a promotion for the Glynn Foundation Music Festival held at Cottage Park in 2019. The foundation was established by Matt and Karen Glynn to honor and continue the work of their son Joshua, whose mission was to spread love through music and music education. We were honored to help tell Joshua's story.
My name is Matthew Glynn. My wife Karen and I had one child. His name was Joshua Glynn, and he was 32 years old, and he was in a tragic car accident where he lost his life. And we've decided that we're going to honor his life for who he was and not for what could have been. Josh was a very admirable young man. He had a high level of compassion, extremely intelligent. He got that from my wife, not from me. And he was a good-looking kid, and he also got that from my wife. So Joshua kind of created his own way through life, and people followed it. But he questioned things too. He didn't just blindly accept anything. When he traveled to foreign countries, he was in Kenya, South Africa, Haiti, and Mexico. He worked in different orphanages, a number of them in each location. And he would always come back and lament about the fact that these kids are barely able to survive. They'll never know the joy of making music, creating music, singing music. And he just used to always talk that someday he'd like to do something about that. And that's where the vision came from. When Joshua was in high school, he went to the Boys and Girls Club and volunteered and created a music program there. And he used to teach kids how to play music. They get a little band together. So what's happened is we have reclaimed a very small area in the Boys and Girls Club to put in a music room, and then we decided to expand it, and we're putting in what we're calling the Josh Glynn Musical Annex at the Boys and Girls Club. For us, we are sharing God's love through music, and Joshua was the epitome of sharing that love. There's a picture that we have on our website of they were taking a picture of an orphan, and they were really close to him. And in that orphan's eye, you can see the entire slums behind Josh. And that always struck him, and he said, if I ever do my own venture, I'm going to call it Glynn. So we invite you to come to the Glynn concert on October 5th from 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 8 o'clock at night. There are 4 bands going to be there, food trucks, a beer wagon, wine wagon. Then we would think you'll have a great time, and you'll be serving a great cause. Thank you.
For more information about the Joshua Glynn Memorial Foundation, visit joshuaglynnfoundation.org. An AARP survey learned that older adults prefer to remain in their homes for as long as possible, but only 1% of national housing includes accessible elements like single-story living or sinks that are wheelchair-friendly. Responding to this need, the AARP established the free program AARP Home Fit, aiming to help make existing homes comfortable and safe for seniors. On July 28th, the Pembroke COA welcomes licensed physical therapist and certified aging-in-place specialist Chris Florek for a presentation discussing this program and offering the information families and seniors can use to help make their current or future residents a lifelong home. The presentation begins at 9:30 a.m. For questions, call the COA at 781-294-8220. Pack up the lawn chairs and call a few friends. Music in the park at Grace Beach is back. On July 25th from 6 to 7:30 p.m., rock out to the powerhouse female vocals and funky rhythms of South Shore-based band Black Top Strut. There will be all the ingredients for a fun night out. Kono Pizza, Just the Dip, and Brewery 44 will be on location with frosty brews and yummy food. Visit the Kingston Recreation's Facebook page for more details. Next up, we have poet Susan Cook Thanes with a reading of her original work.
Our next poet is Susan Cook Thanes. Sue is a retired English teacher from Duxbury High and middle schools. She began to write poetry when Duxbury High sponsored Barbara Helfgott Hyatt as poet in residence in the late 70s. Her poetry often reflects her experiences with family, life, and places that she knows well. She's an active member of the Poetry Circle at Duxbury Free Library and Poetry, the Art of Words in Plymouth, where she will be a featured poet in September. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Susan.
Hello. It's a true pleasure to be here and be part of this event. I have 4 poems I would like to read. They go from the light to the more serious. The first one is called Lemonade, A-I-D. Freckles galloped across the bridge of my nose, new spots appearing each summer. They'll fade. You'll see, everyone said when I was 12. But not believing them, I'd sneak into the kitchen, peer inside the refrigerator to look for a lemon tucked under the lettuce in the bin below. Then, with knife in hand, I'd creep upstairs, hoping no one was in the bathroom. The blade, sliding beneath the peel, released a pungent spray from the pulp I rubbed on my cheeks and nose, blinking back tears. Now I wish I still had those freckles instead of the ones covering my arms and hands, and I prefer my lemon on lobster or in tea. This next poem is, I think I wrote it about 2 years ago, and maybe some of you have shared the same type of experience. Turn here. Yesterday, I left home for exit 6A in Plymouth, but drove right by it. 6A was nowhere in sight. When I found myself at the bridge to the Cape, I knew it wasn't right. It was a bridge too far. Confused, I headed home to exit 10, but it had doubled its number to 20. I was Charlie on the MTA, unable to reach my destination. Now I couldn't even find my home. What in tarnation could I do? My only thought was to take any exit and find a route I knew by heart. What peace, what comfort to find a familiar highway. I turned left, kept driving past signs for Gulf Gas and Dunkin' Donuts, feeling so relieved I missed my road, but had a lovely ride in the countryside before I turned around and rolled right into my driveway. I think you've shared that experience. This next poem is an ekphrastic poem about this owl that was photographed by Priscilla Peterson, and it's also a sonnet. Who knows? This bird with fiery eyes and small hooked bill, her tawny cape with speckled dark spots teeming, looks back as if with sage advice that will protect or guide another from what's seeming. The mystic wisdom nature gives these birds is like a secret charm in some abiding. Athena's was a small owl, so we heard, and Archimedes gave Merlin his tidings. But are these myths of owls' great powers true? In Rome an omen, but to Zuni's good? The world is full of legends' diverse views. To some they're clear, to some misunderstood. So let's just look to recognize the grace of this grand bird, her stately form, her face. And this last one I wrote in March of 2022. Here and there. I pour a glass of wine and sit down to watch the news. Nothing else seems to matter. A grandfather hugs his pink snow-suited granddaughter before she and her mother head into Poland, and he heads back to Kyiv to fight. Mass accident in Lviv and Kharkiv train stations. Those deciding to stay defiantly dig in. Citizens make Molotov cocktails. Blue and yellow flags fly everywhere. Social media resistance, online 20 hours a day. President Zelensky begs NATO for a no-fly zone. The US pledges to defend NATO allies. Ukraine is not among them. We are warned that cyber attacks will take down our grids, but right now, my heart beats for Ukraine. I will pay what I need to at the gas pumps, have sent for a blue and yellow flag to hang in my yard. Zelensky is David to Putin's Goliath. A big stone is needed for the slingshot. A man says, in Ukraine, we have two kinds of ammunition, guns and faith. As Ukrainians hunker down till dawn in bomb shelters, I sadly head upstairs to bed and pray their faith will hold. Thank you.
Do you have some broken things in your home that should be easy to fix if you had the know-how? Learn how to repair them yourself on July 29th at the Plymouth Public Library Fix-It Clinic. From 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., this free all-ages workshop will have Fix-It coaches on hand to help you try to repair household items like appliances, clothing, lamps, electronics, toys, jewelry, and wooden items. The library will provide the workspace, tools, and guidance to help you disassemble, troubleshoot, and hopefully fix your broken stuff. As in life, though, nothing is guaranteed. No registration is required. But if you have expertise you'd like to lend as a Fix-It coach yourself, email sindeglia@ocln.org. The Pembroke Arts Festival returns for its 56th year on August 12th and 13th at Hobbamock Elementary School. See exhibitions from artists of all ages and types of mediums beginning at 10 a.m. This popular family event will also feature performances, activities, food trucks, a craft tent, and more. And if you're interested in showcasing your art, there's still time from now until July 15th. Visit PembrokeArtsFestival.org for submission guidelines and details. The Plymouth Cordage Company had a cultural and historical significance that still resonates as a rope factory turned community that integrated immigrants into Americans and provided a happy and safe workplace for over 100 years. Here is the 2022 Bronze Telly Award winner for history, the Plymouth Cordage Company, on the local scene.
If you came to Plymouth back in the day, and in those days, that's where all the work was, actually. That's what prompted all the growth, and that's why you hear people say, well, North Plymouth has everything, because it started out here with the Cottage Company.
North Plymouth is a seaside community 39 miles south of Boston, where you can find a little bit of everything. To understand North Plymouth now, you must go back in time to 1824, when the Plymouth Cordage Company was established and laid the groundwork for what the small New England village would become. We were privileged to sit down with Bill Rudolph several months before his passing in May of 2020. Bill was the founder of the Plymouth Cordage Historical Society and curator of the Plymouth Cordage Museum.
I started doing a collection of cordage stuff when I was about 14 years old. My great aunt worked for the cordage, as did my great grandfather. So I was very interested in it as a kid. I got an opportunity to come here to work, and not for Plymouth Cordage, but for the then owners of Saltwater Trust, who owned the property in 1980. And I've been here ever since doing the construction. The curator part, it started in 2005. We decided we really needed to have a place to keep all the memorabilia we had and keep the memory of the workers and the company alive. In 1824, when Bourne Spooner started the company, North Plymouth was pretty much farmland. Well, after the War of 1812, how or why he was there, I don't know, but he was in New Orleans. And he learned how to make rope down there using slave labor. He didn't believe in slavery. So he came back to Plymouth, vowing he'd start making better rope using free labor, meaning labor you paid for. In 1824, they filed the papers with the state, starting the corporation, Plymouth Cordage Company. The hemp, which was the raw material used in those days, was imported from Russia. It had to come in big sailing ships across the Atlantic. It had to go into Boston because, as everybody knows, Plymouth Harbor, you can almost walk across at low tide. So it had to be offloaded in Boston and put on smaller ships and brought down to Plymouth on the tides. Even with a small ship, you had to come in on high tide. For them, they would ship the rope, because it was such quantities, by ox cart. It would take 3 days to go from Plymouth to Fairhaven, New Bedford. What's it take now, 30 minutes, 40 minutes? But they had to sleep over 2 nights on the way out and 2 nights on the way back. He picked this location because there was the grist mill on the end of the pond. He was going to use that to supply power to run the spinning wheels, which is part of the rope making process. The other thing they had to build in 1824 was the rope walk. That started out being 900 feet. That why so long? Because the sailing ships wanted 100 fathoms, which is 600 feet. So to make 600 feet of rope, you needed 900 feet of rope walk. The rope shrinks in the process. It's similar to braiding hair. It shrinks by a third. That eventually ended up being over 1,400 feet long, went all the way from the end of the pond out front to Boundary Street. The biggest change came in 1845 when the railroad came to town. That facilitated moving by rail all the raw material from Boston down, and all the finished goods, pretty much the whole East Coast was connected by rail, by 1850. The company kept on growing right up in through the Civil War area. There was a lot of rope needed for the merchant and warships. After the Civil War, there was a lack of labor all up and down the East Coast for two reasons. One, a number of men and women had been lost in the war, and the second reason was the federal government was trying to populate the Midwest to keep other nations from coming into the sparsely populated area. That meant there was a lack of labor all up and down the East Coast, and rope making was a very labor-intensive business at that time. So there'd been some Germans that had come over on their own in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s and worked at the rope company, cordage. And they sent them back to Germany to recruit friends, neighbors, relatives, people they would believe would be good workers and of good character. Mainly friends, neighbors, that type of thing that they really knew. And they were mandated to offer the fare over, not to give it to them, but they'd loan the money for the fare over. They would supply them with housing for them and their families and a job. So that was, at that point, the Franco-Prussian Wars have been going on for about 100 years. So everybody wanted to get out of Dodge anyway. And most companies weren't offering any way to get over any loans for passage. So this was a big plus. So after they used up, this was in the late 1860s, 1870s, they went all over Germany, and they found in a little town called Autzweiler in Germany. They recruited my great-great-grandfather, who came to work here in 1870. He was one of the first Germans over to work here. He worked where this building is now before the building was built. And then after this building was built, he came inside this building to work, Mill 1. After the German population were made use of, they went to Italy, the area around Bologna, and offered the same deal. The two main towns there were Cento and Renazzo, where the immigrants came from.
Much of the cultural melting pot that North Plymouth became can be attributed to the immigrant population the rope factory attracted as employees. We sat down with a longtime North Plymouth resident, Dave Malaguti, whose grandfather was one of the cordage employees who immigrated here from Italy.
Dave Malaguti, longtime Plymouth resident all my life. Grew up here in North Plymouth, moved away when my wife and I built a house up off the Long Pond Road. And recently we've moved back to North Plymouth because we're living in my parents' house that I have control over now, Sold our other house. Love it here in North Plymouth. A little different from when I was a kid, but still a nice place. My relationship with the cottage, my immigrant grandfather, who came over from Italy sometime around 1893, worked a couple of jobs. I think he was a weaver at one point, and I think he was a shoemaker at another point. But because he had some secondary education back in the old country, he was able to get a steam engineer's license. Now, that's a pretty impressive feat, considering the fact that the first thing you have to do is learn the language, and then, take whatever test you need to take. And he became the night boiler operator down here at the cottage. I don't know how many years, and Bill Rudolph was trying to find it in the old records, but some of the old records had been burnt. And unfortunately, it's about that same period that my grandfather worked here. But I remember as a kid, the lines of people coming to the cottage, and they would be coming down that road, going into the plant, doing the various tasks that they did. There were rope makers, there were dockmen, there were warehouse people. This little engine was pulling materials all around to all the different places. Raw materials going in and that same little engine and the others like it pulled the completed rope back out and brought them to the docks and warehouses where they were loaded on ships and shipped out. This is an antique. This is really an antique. This is actually a rope twister. And if you can see, one strand of rope came here, one strand came here, one strand came here. This had to make a very large rope because look at the size of the individual strands. And what you did is you fed the individual strands through these spots and then you twisted. And this is back in the days when it was manual labor, so you had a big wooden, probably a wooden or a steel bar that went through here, and you twisted and twisted and twisted all the way down the rope walk until you had a completed rope.
So now we had a whole bunch of Germans and a whole bunch of Italians in North Plymouth, where there had been nobody, 20, 30 years before. Then they went to, the Italians were 1880, 1890, up to around 1900. And 1890, 1900 up to 1930, they went to mainland Portugal, Cape Verde Islands and the Azores, and offered the same deal there.
Followed by the Portuguese community.
My name is Colleen Rice. I lived in North Plymouth all of my life until I married my husband Mark in '83. My great-grandfather, worked there. He was an immigrant from Portugal, from the Azores Islands in Portugal. One of the reasons was because most of the Portuguese people in the Azores were Catholics, and he wanted to be a Protestant. There were very few Protestants in the Azores. So he actually was a stowaway, is what I'm told, on a ship and came to this country. And when he went through customs, I'm not sure, I think he came right through Boston. And his name was Anton Schwaz in the Azores. But when he came through customs, they said, okay, your name is Sears. He said, okay. And from then on, he was known as Anton Sears. But when he came here, one of the first things he did was he found other Portuguese people who came here, and they all built a little church in North Plymouth, and they called it the North Methodist Church.
Why did all these different populations flock to Cordage?
So that gave us a whole melting pot in North Plymouth. There were other nationalities here too that came into work. A bunch of French Canadians came down. There were people from Scandinavia, a lot of people from England, France, Alsace-Lorraine. The company in 1899 started a welfare department, not meaning welfare like freebies, but welfare for the betterment of the workers. And they hired a man named William E.C. Nasro to be in charge of this department. And he'd studied with the great thinkers in Europe about what would make people happier in their work, be more productive. So he started building duplex houses around the ponds. From the row houses that had been there, the new houses were all duplexes.
Bourne Spooner believed that happy employees who were well cared for make better workers. And this philosophy showed in the quality of the housing and the care the Cordage Company provided.
My name is Dick Quintal. Originally from Plymouth, Massachusetts. Born in North Plymouth on Nix Rock Road. In a house I still own, actually, with my grandparents. Starting from where the cottage was, all the housing they built around there, or he built around there, was for his workers. And you could tell the different workers, you know what I mean? Some of them be 8 units, 6 units, 2 units. If you look in the one I'm in right now, 429, it's actually got all the old woodworking. So it had to be for somebody pretty important. It was a single family house, and it was up and down. And the woodwork is beautiful.
One of the things that the Cordage Company did was they built all the houses, the housing in North Plymouth, And to this day, actually, the most beautiful homes, I believe, in Plymouth are right there.
The company started in 1900 an all-day kindergarten where all the workers' children that weren't in school could go to be like a daycare setup. So the women could go to work, meaning there'd be two incomes coming into the household to make things better. And at night they had cooking schools because a lot of the immigrants that had come in weren't familiar with the local vegetables and fruits, so they didn't know how to best prepare stuff nutritionally, food nutritionally, and how to preserve it and stuff. They also had a Sloyd school for boys where they learned woodworking. They had classes for the girls and how to make clothes and stuff of that nature. 1902, there was a scarlet fever outbreak in Plymouth County, not in Plymouth itself, but in Plymouth County, so they hired 2 visiting nurses that would go to your house and take care of you or any member of your family for free, providing you worked for the company. The nurses lived right on property and they were on call all the time. 1905, they added a clinic and a doctor, again, to take care of your health. Universal health care by 1910 with no co-pays. Try getting that today. They started a library, the Loring Library, that was up on the hill, which is now moved across the street and is part of the Lutheran Church. Mr. Loring was the major stockholder. Interesting fact was that although there was Americanization classes in the building, they also had all the books in the classic language because the company believed that you shouldn't lose track of where you came from just because you were an American.
These practices attracted a massive influx of European immigrants from the 1880s through the 1920s, including Northern Italians, French Canadian, Azorean, and mainland Portuguese, all seeking work at Cottage and a better life for their families. With this growth came the explosion of North Plymouth's shipping industry, quickly making it the second largest shipping port in Massachusetts. By the late 19th century, the Plymouth Cottage Company had become the largest manufacturer of rope and twine in the world.
The company believed, interestingly enough, that the reason they were successful, they had good people in charge, but the reason they were successful, the good people in charge didn't make the goods that were good and were world famous for their quality. If you made people healthy and happy, they'd work better and give you a better product. The company believed in that, from Bourne Spooner through everybody else that was in there.
After 140 years as the largest employer in Plymouth, the Plymouth Cottage Company closed its doors in 1964. The 45-acre space has been transformed in modern times into a bustling cottage commerce center, still populated by many descendants who have crossed the oceans to make a better life. North Plymouth's many parks, businesses, homes, and walking trails are never far from view of the Cottage Factory smokestack. It stands as a legacy and a beacon on the North Plymouth waterfront. We remember the Cottage Company for its role in making North Plymouth what it is today, and we remember Bill Rudolph for preserving an important part of North Plymouth and Massachusetts history. You can visit the Rudolph Pavilion amidst a duck pond on the small island in front of the main historic tower, dedicated to Bill for his many years of service and historical preservation. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill.
And that's what's good and good to know on the local scene this week. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. We are grateful for your attention. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe to The Local Scene here and share everywhere. Thank you, friends.